listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. Lured, beaten, threatened, filmed and humiliated. This is what's happening to gay and bi men across the country right now.
This is not just in Victoria, it's throughout Australia in every capital city, and there's reports in other countries throughout the world. So the people that are engaging in this really violent behaviour are sharing information and coordinating and getting inspired on an international level.
Now advocates and police have teamed up to get the message out to try and keep people safe, but they say they need victims' help. That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Thursday, the 26th of June.
Hey Tara, and to you listening. Starting overseas this morning, where it appears the ceasefire between Iran and Israel is holding as the NATO summit in the Netherlands wraps up. Donald Trump is among the world leaders representing the bloc's 32 members and has overnight met with NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte, the pair offering this expert analysis on what's unfolded in the last fortnight.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
And the circus didn't end there, with Daddy Trump later asked by a journo about the comments.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you Daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
This feels like reality TV at this point, but this comes as NATO members have agreed to lift their defence spending to 5% of GDP over the next decade amid Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine and the rising threat of terrorism. Now, this is something that Trump, a longtime critic of NATO, says is a big win for the US as it follows his calls for member nations to lift their spend so America doesn't have to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and while they've been in The Hague, Trump and his Secretary of State Marco Rubio have been downplaying the leaked US intelligence report, which is claiming its strikes on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend didn't destroy the country's nuclear program.
Yeah, the report suggests that the strikes only set back the program a few months. Israel this morning saying it's been set back many years, and then we have Trump who says they virtually obliterated the sites. So who knows at this point?
Good news for anyone with a foot in the housing market, homeowners, investors and hopeful home buyers. Economists and two of the big four banks are tipping there'll be a rate cut next month after better than expected inflation figures were announced yesterday. Despite the prediction it would stay steady, headline inflation fell more than expected in the 12 months to May to a 3.5-year low of 2.1%, while trimmed inflation recorded its lowest figures since November 2021 at 2.4%.
Yeah, and now what's helped this happen basically is things like falling petrol prices, which is down 10% in the last year, Chris, which is great news, as well as things like rental growth slowing. And look, with inflation dropping, it'll hopefully give some comfort to our friends over at the Reserve Bank
to
hopefully give us a rate cut at the next meeting in 2 weeks' time. But Commonwealth and NAB have already tweaked their forecast, saying they're expecting that'll happen, while experts say a cut will help safeguard growth for the economy now that inflation is down. So if the RBA announces a cut, it'll also mean relief for mortgage holders and people hoping to borrow to purchase a home. So win-win-win, fingers crossed. Come on, RBA.
5 staffers from the New South Wales Premier and Police Minister's offices will appear before a parliamentary inquiry into a fake caravan terrorism plot over concerns it may have misled Parliament into rushing through new and controversial anti-Semitism laws. The government staff were threatened with arrest after first failing to attend the inquiry, which is backed by the coalition Greens and crossbenchers in the upper house. It had initially called Labor Premier Chris Minns and Police Minister Yasmin Catley to give evidence about what they knew and how they handled information about the plot.
Yeah, and back in January, Minns described the caravan just outside Sydney, laden with explosives, and a note listing synagogues to be targeted had the potential to cause a mass casualty event. Police since having this to say.
The caravan was never going to cause a mass casualty event, but instead was concocted by criminals who wanted to cause fear for personal benefit.
Now, both Minns and Catley didn't show up when called to give evidence because they're both lower house members and lower house MPs don't have to show up to upper house inquiries.
So instead, their staff members were called, all 5 failing to appear last week, and that's when chatter of arrest warrants started to swell, which is an unprecedented move in New South Wales. Actually, it's never happened in New South Wales Parliament's history, and now these staffers are coming to the inquiry. The Premier has slammed the move, accusing the inquiry of overreach, and the staffers are set to give evidence on Friday.
Yeah, and look, failing to give evidence at a parliamentary inquiry is an offence that's punishable by imprisonment in New South Wales. However, it's never actually been tested, so let's see what happens here.
Yeah, it'll be a very interesting space to watch, and the reason that this story caught my attention is because at the time of this fake caravan plot, Peter Dutton came under fire because he was pressing the Prime Minister and the Premier to really disclose to the Australian public what information they did know about this plot. Now, his motives behind that are unclear. Some people accused him of trying to stoke culture wars and stoke fear and create this, tension in society. But Minzy got off scot-free. Yeah, he kind of did have a point. Minzy got off scot-free at the time. And look, now that it's under the microscope, I think it is a good thing. You can't be making laws without having the right information in front of you. And that's not to say, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Australia. It is on the rise in New South Wales specifically. There's no doubt about that. But to use this event as the impetus when it was fake is questionable and should be looked into.
Australia has been ranked 8th in the world for work-life balance, according to a new global index, due to us having the world's highest minimum wage and shorter working weeks, apparently. The Global Life Work Balance Index assessed the top 60 GDP nations, looking at things like leave, healthcare, safety, inclusivity and working hours, and it looks at how the countries prioritise those things to decipher our well-being and then compares that alongside the country's productivity.
Now, Australia performed well with 72 points out of 100, and we did better than a bunch of wealthier European cities. It's the second year we've come in at 8th, while New Zealand topped the list with nearly 87 points out of 100. The US, not even close, coming in at 59.
Oh, poor Trump. He'll be devastated at that. Now, our minimum working wage, as mentioned, was one of the key reasons that we're ranked so highly. We pay people a minimum of $24.95 an hour in Australia, which is more than any other nation in the world, apparently, and it's a few dollars an hour difference between places like New Zealand and the UK. In NZ, they get $23.50 an hour NZ, or roughly $21.75 AUD. But this one shocked me. We apparently have one of the world's shortest working weeks. What?
Oh.
With an average of 32.9 hours, well below the global average of 39.19. So I'm confused with this. Who's working 32.9 hours? Because are you? I'm not. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll put a prompt out in our broadcast channel. We'll ask you guys how you feel about this. I just think this year has been riddled with people from so many different industries, like healthcare workers, teachers, all these different industries coming out saying that work-life balance is slowly evaporating in this country. So very, very curious to hear from you, our listeners. We will pop that poll up. Make sure you interact with us so we can get to the bottom of this.
And Australia's first homemade rocket will attempt to blast off from Queensland again. Australian company Gilmore Space Technologies says it's planning to launch the rocket named Eris between Tuesday and Thursday next week after running into some weather and tech-related hurdles at its last planned launch. It'll take off from its North Queensland launch pad at Bowen, which is a small town in the Whitsundays.
Right now, the biggest thing that could see things go astray is the wild wind that's forecast for the East Coast over the coming days, with a SpaceX rocket launch pushed back for similar reasons this week. So, fingers crossed, the winds chill and we can finally see Australia joining the world's space race.
Yeah, 100%. This is really cool. And where Gilmore Space is launching from in North Queensland is actually Australia's only certified space facility. But can we take a second? Eris, Chris, Eris. Why is the rocket named Eris? I could not find any explanation online behind the name, and I need to know. I have a friend whose partner works at Gilmore Space, and I'm going to message her straight after this to find out. Because we live in Australia. And I just don't understand. Surely it's leaving from Queensland, North Queensland. Surely Barry or Gary or Daz, Bob Catter even, or we're a rugby state. What about Kev or Wally for the Rocket?
Gosh, I love that. But you know what? When you said the word Eris, my ears pricked up because in Greek mythology, Eris is the goddess of strife and discord, often associated with conflict, particularly in war. So, ooh.
Well, maybe this is why they've run into delays.
Nice one. Hey, look, that brings our headlines to a close. We're going to change pace. Next up for our deep dive, we're looking into the rise of homophobic attacks across the country and the surprising way social media and young men are playing a role. Stick around. That deep dive is coming up for you next.
Gay and bi guys are being targeted through hookup apps like Grindr
as a means to lure, kidnap, rob and extort unsuspecting victims.
And to make it worse, it's being filmed and uploaded on social media.
Because they're so similar, police suspect the incidents are linked. And today, police didn't rule out the possibility that there could be more that they don't yet know about.
These attacks have been happening right across the country. Just last week, a Perth court heard horrific details of how a group of teens lured gay and bi men to a secluded area before brutally attacking them. While in Victoria, more than 30 arrests have been made related to similar crimes, with some of the alleged offenders as young as 13. A community forum was held in Victoria over the weekend, aiming to bring together members of the gay and bi community to get the message out and to hear from some of the victims. Joe Ball is Victoria's LGBTIQA+ Communities Commissioner and was on the panel. Joe, what can you tell me about the forum and what did we take away from it?
Yeah, there's been an increase over the last year. It came to our attention nearly a year ago today that gay and bisexual men were being targeted through dating apps to meet up with men, and when they got there, they were being bashed by groups, by gangs of 3 or more. Although it came to Victoria Police and my attention a year ago, it's been ongoing prior to that time, but we've seen an increase recently. This is not just in Victoria, it's throughout Australia in every capital city, and there's reports in other countries throughout the world. So what we're realising is that the people that are engaging in this behaviour, in this really violent behaviour, are sharing information and coordinating and getting inspired on an international level. And it requires, the commonality, I guess, is that it's tech-facilitated abuse, finding people through, geolocations that you use through dating apps. They meet up and it's not the person they expect, or it's one person, and then that person lures them to a group of men that bash them, and then it's often filmed, and often the bashing, at the end of it, people are told to either transfer money, there's standover tactics, extortion, and they might even follow them up in their home and harass them over days and weeks. So it's pretty horrendous crime. And in Victoria, there's been now 35 arrests related to it. It's really important you come forward. And some people had reported to the police and some people hadn't. And there was like a shame and stigma overlay to whether people had reported. We need to have arrests in this and we need to have a crackdown.
And I understand that one of the people as well that was at the forum was a police officer, at least, that was across what's been happening in this space. Do they think that this is, say, a particular group who is facilitating this and driving this, or is it one attack has been copied and is being copied around the country and around the world?
I don't think there's evidence to say that it's sort of centrally organised is what I would say, but there is some kind of common theme in the attacks. Homophobia is one of them, the specific attacking of gay and bisexual men through Grindr, through a range of other dating apps. That's all similar. I think that what is the commonality, though, is that it is young men doing this. So all the offenders have been under 30 and the majority of them are sort of under 25. Victoria Police found there was a decrease in attacks over the Christmas New Year period, and then there was a re-emergence of it in February this year. This is one of the reasons that Victoria government has introduced the post and boast criminalisation legislation that it did last week, because there's an element here where people are sharing what they're doing and other people are seeing it. And we do see this in other jurisdictions, like other criminal cases, like carjacking is one where people share that online. But this is one where they're sharing a gang bashing, and sometimes that video is shown to the person themselves or shown to a future person.
And what came from the forum, and do you think enough is being done now to crack down on this?
I think what we tried to really do at the forum, and there was success in it, is that people came who had experienced this. So I alone heard people speak into the room, like 3 different people talked about how that had personally happened to them. And I think what we were really trying to do in the room was break down the stigma that victims feel, that they are somehow responsible or foolish, that they played some role in the crime. Because the reality is that everyone needs to be safe online, but nobody is responsible for being bashed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, many members of the gay and bi community would no doubt be feeling quite nervous and shaken in light of these attacks. Have you got any advice for them?
I think one message is how seriously we're taking this. You know, myself as the Victorian LGBTIQA+ Commissioner, we had members of Parliament who came into the space as well to hear these stories. It's being taken very seriously because it is happening in every state and territory. And I think that what I want to say to people is that, yes, being safe online is important, and there are messages and things you can do to verify the person, meet up in a 24-hour venue, like in the first instance, to see if that's the person who they are. They said they are. Thorn Harbour Health is somewhere you can go to get information about this in Victoria, about how you can stay safe. What I want to say to people is, that if it has happened to you, we need you to come forward and share your story. And it doesn't need to turn into a criminal case, but there are also things you are eligible for, like victim support benefits. Some of these men have been hospitalised, had very serious injuries. As it unravels, it's quite widespread. Police in every jurisdiction have had meetings about this as well. So people, as a first point of call, if you have in your state or territory, which I think there is in everyone, you could go to a liaison officer, a GLOW officer, a GLBTI liaison officer. You could also call Q Life or Rainbow Door, which are helplines. The reality is I don't want people to sit in this shame and stigma and violence that they've experienced without getting support. Everyone deserves to be safe. If this has happened to you, it is absolutely unacceptable, and there are supports available and there are legal recourse available. And frankly, we need you to come forward so we can help stop this to happen to the next person.
Someone else who's been a fierce LGBTIQA+ community advocate and has been working to get the message out about these attacks is content creator Odus Moore, who also attended the forum and was part of the panel. Odus, you heard some of the stories that were shared and what police are now doing in response to these attacks. Are you confident that enough is being done?
So I've done some work with the Victorian Pride Lobby in the past couple of years, and there was 3 sort of things that we speak about in terms of where the police can improve to build trust with the community. One, it was adequate punishment for police officers who do wrong by our community. Another one, which is sort of the big one around this event, is improving the process of reporting on prejudice-motivated crimes, like hate crimes. The problem that we're facing in Victoria is that the VicPol will report on prejudice-motivated crimes very inconsistently. And so the Crime Statistic Agency doesn't actually release that data to community advocate groups because it is reported on so inconsistently and it's unreliable. So one of the big things that I think the police should improve on is making it easier to report prejudice-motivated crimes. So it's a statistic that we can pull up to be like, hey, is this getting better? Is this getting worse? Because I know the trust in our community is, there's tensions there, right? There's historical tensions. And so some people don't feel comfortable coming forward. I know I've heard some examples, and, granted these are in other states. People have come forward to me in DMs and online about how, they've come to the police and then they've essentially been victim blamed. I will say, at the community event, people spoke about their experiences with the police there, and they were like, it was exceptional. It was great. So there's just a level of inconsistency.
Being someone who advocates for the community and has taken part in this forum, you're on social media chatting to people about this kind of stuff. How do you think the LGBTIQA plus community is feeling right now amid all these attacks?
Angry, scared, exhausted. I think the narrative that's coming on online at the moment is something that we haven't, something that's not new, right? We're a community of predators, that we're mentally ill, that we are, preying on children, we're trying to convert children. Like, these narratives have been around since the early 1900s, since like Freud classified homosexuality as like a sexual deviancy, to the 1950s, to the 1970s where Anita Bryant was like, save our children, to the 1990s and 80s around the AIDS pandemic, we're morally corrupt, like safe schools, marriage equality. Like, this is to me, it's a cyclical kind of narrative that sort of pops up again. What is new, I think, is social media's role in that, and the sort of I hate to say this, but the socioeconomic times we live in, it's quite uncertain. People are, scared, feared, and the queer community is an easy scapegoat. These are the people, this is the reason, this is what's wrong with our society. This is why you can't afford your groceries. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, a lot of us are scared. I think I've heard some experiences from people at the forum, and they shared their experience of, what it was like in the 1980s. It was really terrifying for them. I think the difference now is at least we have some institutional backing behind us. Like, the police are actually investigating these crimes. It's not just swept under the rug.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that this is being taken seriously. Odus, as an advocate and outside of the forum, you have been speaking to other members of the gay and bi community who have been victims of this offending. Many are worried and not feeling safe. What's your message to the community right now? It's
terrifying. There's a few people that are close to me who have shared their stories with me, and I didn't even know. I think my message is this: like, this is really scary, right now, but people have tried to get rid of us before by making us illegal. They've tried to get rid of us before by saying with therapy. They tried to get rid of us during the AIDS pandemic, and they're trying to get rid of us now. They have not succeeded, and they never will. And this is nothing new. This is something that our community has faced for a very long time. What I would say, lean into community right now. Find people that you can spend time with, connect with, build that space, and keep each other safe.
Yeah, that's a great message and great advice to finish on. I really appreciate you joining me on the briefing today, Odus.
Thank you.
That was community advocate and content creator Odus Moore speaking with me there. And earlier, Victoria's LGBTIQA+ Communities Commissioner, Joe Ball. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.